even know you were already recording. So, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, anyway.
Well, that's because we haven't recorded in over 3 months.
Yeah.
So of course, you're not used to the thing being recording. So, yeah. So since it's been a while, and we might have some people who are just joining this podcast for the first time. Hi. We should tell people about Two Next Podcast, and this is episode 24. And, well, I'm Sean.
And I'm Lisa.
And we are a married Gen X couple. We got together because of our interest in the Beach Boys and all that. And so we like to talk about them. And we figured, why not record our conversations and let other people hear what we have to say?
You realize since our last episode, we had our 25th wedding anniversary?
We did.
Yeah.
And we also had your birthday, which is the day we're recording this. Happy birthday, dear.
Hee hee. And happy birthday to my birthday buddy.
Oh, who would that be? Frank Zappa?
Yes.
Jane Fonda?
Yes.
And
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel.
And this is also the birthday of Carl Wilson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are recording this on the birthday of Carl Wilson, who would be, 50 by now? At least.
No, I think today he would have been 78.
Oh, that.
I know.
Oh, that's true because Dennis's 80th was just a couple of weeks ago.
I know.
Good night. I don't know. To me, Carl can never be 78. He'd be 40 his whole life.
He was born 40.
He died 40. And he's still 40.
Yeah. I mean, actually, he died at 51.
But still, he was 40. Come on. And to add to other uplifting news, this is yet another episode that we recorded after somebody just died in the Beach Boys family, as it were. Andy Paley is recently gone. Rest in peace. We got to meet him on that really bizarre night.
Yeah, I actually had forgotten about that until Probin happened to share a photo that I took.
Yeah.
It was at Brian's concert with Paul Simon.
Yes.
In summer of 2001 at the Garden State Arts Center in Holmdel, New Jersey. During the intermission because Brian went up first. And then during the intermission, Brian and the entire band went up onto the plaza to just chat with fans, sign autographs. And it was wonderful. And we never took our seats again for the Paul Simon set.
We were gonna stay for the Paul Simon set. We really did. Yeah, we really wanted to.
We never went back to our seats because we just had such a good time talking to everybody. And I took a picture of Probin, Melinda, and Andy Paley.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten about that picture.
Yeah, we were supposed to see Jeff, too, backstage at some point. And we even mentioned that to Melinda. She's like, oh, you need to see Jeff? Oh, well, come with me. And she took us backstage.
But we couldn't find Jeff. I think he had already gone to the bus or left or something.
Yeah, he left somewhere because he was feeling ill.
And
so we didn't get to see him.
And we went, so trying to find our way back out, we went through a door and almost ended up on stage.
Technically, I was on stage because I was like, where are we? And then 30 feet away from me, there's Paul Simon. I was like, yeah, I better
Paul
turn the other way.
Back. he never saw
He was
him.
in the middle of singing something.
Yeah. I mean, nobody noticed us. We just turned around and got out of there.
We just looked for, it's like, we're trying to get out of here. Can you show us out of here? And I remember Andy Paley was with us too.
Yeah.
And being very dramatic about I don't remember what he was talking about, but he was very, and then we did this, and then this. Oh, and I got to tell you this. And then someone walked up to him and said, Andy, I need you to fill this out. He said, what's this? Oh, you need to fill this out before we can go to Japan. He said, oh, okay. So he sat down there and filled that stuff out. But
yeah,
that was a really bizarre night.
Good times.
Good times. And, there was something else I wanted to bring up. This is not going to take long. In the previous episode, I had pointed out an observation I made that from the Beach Boys in concert up through Spirit of America, if you were going to buy a new Beach Boys album that was just released, it had multiple discs. Oh, no, going back to So Tough, actually, because you had Pet Sounds, Holland had the EP, In Concert was a 2-record set. You had Endless Summer, Spirit of America. And one of our listeners pointed out to me also, if you were going to buy the reissues of Smiley Smile, Friends, Wild Honey in 2020, those were on double albums. And I was like, that's right. They were. Because Friends and Smiley Smile were paired together for some reason, and Wild Honey in 2020, and those were on Warner Brothers. And I had forgotten about that. And I don't really see those in my travels a lot. I'm really curious, though, as to how they sound. Like if they have improved sound quality over the original Capitol releases or what. And it's also something I'm wondering as to when they were actually released that way, to see if it still is part of the multiple record chain. But nothing significant, I guess, about that other than that strange observation. It's thoughts like that happen in my head at night, and I don't get a lot of sleep sometimes because I get too deep about it. So what about you?
What about me?
Anything you want to bring up before we get into today's topic?
Well, I think this came about after our last recording. I guess it was somewhat hinting from Al and some discussion that stemmed from that about Brian's band coming together and going out, doing shows with Al and Blondie, hopefully. Like we hope they would be included as well. And just kind of keeping it going. I know in the discussion, a really good point was brought up because, of course, there are people who are like, well, if it's not the actual artist, then what good is it? And blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you look at, as some people pointed out, of course, the composers of centuries ago, whose music is still performed by orchestras and other ensembles all over the world many, many times a year. And then things like the Glenn Miller Orchestra. I mean, Glenn Miller died in, I believe, 1945 in a plane crash. And yet his orchestra, of course, the people he performed with, the people who sat on stage with him are most likely long gone.
I would hope so at this point.
Other musicians stepped up to fill in roles over the years, but they still perform. And I point out to you, I mean, we've gone to see Chicago many times. I mean, I just enjoy the music. I honestly cannot name any member of the group except for Robert Lamb, and that is
because
only
of the Beach Boys connection.
That's only because he was, he had a tangential relationship to Dennis being married to Robert Lamb's ex-wife. And that's try to draw that on a chart. And I'm not even sure if I could pick them out in a police lineup. I mean, I don't know who these people are, but the fact is, I do know that there are a few original Chicago members on stage, but I don't know who they are. I don't know their names. The fact is, the people who are out there on stage performing as Chicago, as legitimate, licensed, contracted members of the band. So we're not talking about a cover band or a tribute band. This is Chicago. The fact is, they put on a fantastic show of fantastic music. And it's like, I just enjoy their music. I'm not deep enough a fan to know everything there is to know about the band. I mean, eventually, the founding members who are in the lineup, eventually, they're going to retire. And I think it's going to keep going forever and ever and ever because they keep bringing in people who can play the material with fidelity and who can sing the material with fidelity. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And the thing about Chicago that I like to point out when we get into these big discussions about, is it really the Beach Boys with just Mike and Bruce on stage, which that's a whole complicated thing right there. And people say, well, what about Chicago? The thing about Chicago is that it's not like suddenly the band stopped and then they decided to get back together and just threw together people who, this is the band. As over the years, different members were kicked out or decided to quit
or
and they had to replace. Well, only one died. Actually, two, if you count. I think his name's Louder. They eventually got an eighth member in the 70s, and he's no longer with us.
The point is,
But the thing is, like, if you go to a Chicago concert right now and you buy their latest album, it is the exact same band.
Yeah, that's true. It's the studio band
on
and
tour.
the touring band are
They're
the same people.
Yes. And also somebody pointed out on the Endless Harmony forum that the guys in Chicago pretty much always intended to be a quote unquote faceless band. Like basically the star of the show is the music.
Well, yeah. And as it should be, and as it is.
Yeah.
But going back to the point you just made, I mean, Brian's band, unlike the Beach Boys, as they are currently, like if you buy a ticket to a Beach Boys concert, you're not going to hear most of those musicians ever on a record.
Or if you do, it's going to be called a Mike Love record.
And that's why, except for the 2012, the Celebration 50 tour, that's why you have not seen a live Beach Boys album since 1973.
Yeah.
Because Mike's band, the band Mike tours with, is not like Mike does not hold a recording license.
Right.
And the members of his touring band that performed on the Celebration 50 tour alongside members of Brian's band, that was like probably a separate contract and license put together just for that tour. So that was kind of a different situation there.
Yeah.
And again, the people you saw on stage for that tour are the same people you hear on the live recording and the same people you hear for the most part on That's Why God Made the Radio.
Yep.
So it's a different situation. But I just like the thought of Brian's music carrying on in a live setting performed
by those people.
Again, I use the word fidelity, that people who have great love for that music, great respect for that music, they're not just a bunch of hired hands. Like, these are people who play this stuff for fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty much how, I don't want to diminish anybody's effort, but I mean, isn't that how Brian got wind of them to begin with? Like the Wild Honey Orchestra people.
How long has the Wild Honey Orchestra been a thing? And is it even the same people every time?
No, but I mean, the fact is that there was a community of people in the LA area who play Brian's music and have done so for a very long time.
One of whom being Robbie Rist. I love it.
Like in their own, and what I mean by for fun is that they're playing this music because they want to, because they love it. Like they sit there and learn it. Like it's not their day job. Like they do it because.
Yep.
And yeah, they might get paid for it and that's wonderful. But it's like, they're going to do it no matter what.
Mm-hmm. I would.
Well, we did. We did.
Yeah, people paid for that admission. We didn't see a dime of it.
No. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
anyway,
just,
I hope that does happen. No one has said a word for sure that it's 100% going to happen. It's been brought up. And I do believe Al said they did get Brian's okay to do that.
Well, also
they got his blessing.
It's kind of, I think the reason why it even became a topic for discussion at all is because going by past history, Al tends to mention things that eventually happen.
That is true.
You know, Al doesn't just go shooting his face off.
Yeah.
That things that Al brings up, it might take a while, but usually if Al mentions something, there's at least a germ of truth to it.
Yep.
So,
that's how we first heard about the Feel Flows box
exactly.
set.
Exactly. And other things too.
Yeah.
So, because didn't Al hint about like what became the Paradise Cove meeting?
Did he? He might have. I don't remember.
I know there are other things that Al had brought up that eventually came to pass.
Sure. He's still been doing shows too. And a recent show, he did the Beaks of Eagles.
Ooh.
Yeah. Anywho, why are we recording right now? Why are we talking and why did we schedule a recording session for now?
Schedule?
Yeah.
What are you, Peter Asher?
Well, I just heard the man say that. I just got in the habit, so.
Well, we decided to take on a small project after the Beach Boys documentary that came out on Disney Plus some months ago. And there was a lot of discussion about it. A lot of discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly that it was way too short.
Yeah.
And it just made me kind of think, is there a Beach Boys documentary that gets it right? What we did is we watched Endless Harmony, Beach Boys, an American Band, and I hate when people just call things the Beach Boys.
Oh, kind of like that 1976 TV special, which is not called It's Okay. That is not the name of it. Stop calling it that, people.
Okay, but the thing is, again, if you just call something the Beach Boys, it's kind of hard to distinguish it. I mean, I'd rather go around calling it It's Okay, because then that's a lot easier to identify.
The 1976 documentary.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a drag. Just like it's a drag to call this thing the 2024 documentary or the Disney Plus documentary.
Or that piece of that was on Disney
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Not necessarily saying that's my opinion, by the way.
So yeah, we watched these 3 documentaries because these are kind of the main ones.
Yes. At least the ones that are definitely career retrospectives.
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, the 1976, which isn't really that much retrospective on their career. It touches a little bit on their earlier days, but it's mostly about, hey, here's what they're up doing now.
Yeah, it's more like present day kind of thing.
Let's throw Brian in the water and make him try to surf.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, let's take someone who just got off drugs and put them with somebody who is currently on drugs.
Yeah.
Lots of drugs.
Oh my God. Yeah. I just read that Blues Brothers book. Oh my, I'm shocked that John Belushi even survived the 70s. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Sorry.
It's a good book though. Read it.
Yeah. I don't want to go 271 on this podcast here.
So, oh man, dude, that is an old reference. Hello to the Pet Zones mailing list
which
people.
Still exists.
God. Anyway, and we also, at least for now, stayed away from Brian-centric documentaries such as Beautiful Dreamer and I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, just because we wanted something that was more inclusive of the whole band instead of something where the focus would just be on Brian.
Yeah.
Which also makes sense because those documentaries also tend to lean much more towards the music, the creation, which is fantastic, which is what you really want. But that doesn't tell the story of the whole band.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we might do a Brian documentary comparison, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I think we should just enjoy those.
Yeah, I mean, especially because the latest documentary has been out for a while. We haven't been really good with keeping up with new releases lately.
Yeah, because, life.
Yeah.
So we watched these 3 documentaries, and I kind of took very minimal notes where I set up a Google sheet and had different tabs for pre-60s and then 60s, 70s, 80s/90s, 2000s, and then another tab for just songs that are included in the documentary, at least a significant portion, if not the entire song.
Okay.
To just kind of get a feel of what music was actually used in these documentaries.
So like you're not counting like things that are kind of in the background for a few seconds.
No. I'm just counting where there's like a real significant chunk of the song or just the entire song. Because again, I wanted to just reflect on what music is presented in these documentaries. So looking at these, man, I got some things to say. So let's look first at the pre-60s tab.
Okay.
And I guess what we can kind of do here is look at the 3 documentaries. And for this particular era, which one told the best story or gave the most story? Just for ease, let's just call the current documentary the Disney Plus.
Okay. Sounds like we can do that.
Or the Disney documentary. So the Disney documentary definitely tells much more story.
Yeah.
Like more origin story. Endless Harmony did talk about the Wilsons coming to California, about Murray and Audrey getting together, about the Wilson and Love families getting together at Christmas, and then Al meeting Brian, Al getting involved with Brian. And then the American Band really told very little about
Yeah.
these early years, just about musical influences, about Hawthorne High School, Carl's love of Chuck Berry, and Brian's love of Four Freshmen. And that was about it.
You know, the interesting thing is right before we recorded, because I was going through here and I'm like, wait, there was a mention of Chuck Berry in an American Band. And I looked it up. Brian mentioned Chuck Berry, but as if he were interested. He's like, yeah, I was influenced by these people, Chuck Berry, blah, blah. Like, he didn't mention Carl at all. So that was interesting.
But in the Disney documentary, there was a lot more about setting up. There was this Wilson family that lived in Los Angeles. They moved to Hawthorne, and 3 brothers, and then the cousin getting involved in singing. And then one of Brian's high school friends got involved. And something that isn't touched upon the other 2 documentaries, then a boy moved in across the street, and his name was David Marks.
David Marks was in Endless Harmony.
But very briefly.
Yeah, that's true. He was given a lot more attention in the Disney doc.
In fact, on the next tab, I believe, yeah, I mean, David Marks is only mentioned, I think, once the band actually got together. Whereas in Disney, it talks more about there was this boy who moved in across the street. And I think David Marks is interviewed, has quite a few sound bites.
Yeah.
Like where he talks about the Wilsons across the street throwing trash at him and saying how Hawthorne was better. And nice welcome to the neighborhood.
Yep.
But David Marks is given a lot more attention than the other documentaries give.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it gets into Brian's interests and how I kind of love how they have that he was either considering going into being a professional baseball player or being a psychologist. Never a mention of going into music as a profession.
Yeah, by the way, your notes in this thing just made me think, Brian Wilson, psychologist or baseball? Like that sounds like an essay title or something.
I know, right?
We got to use that for something.
Yes, we do.
We called it, by the way.
But the Disney documentary also just brings in a lot of tidbits and information that you don't get elsewhere. There's a lot of Wilson home movies, little clips of things.
Yeah.
Like there's a clip of Brian as a young teenager in his house, shirtless, playing a guitar. Probably Carl's guitar.
I'm pretty sure.
Because I don't think Brian ever actually owned his own guitar.
What I'm curious to know is, was he actually playing it, or was he just, because that was silent film?
Yeah, but you know what?
He probably he probably did know some basic chords by then.
Yeah, we're talking about Brian here.
Yeah.
Even though he was not a guitar player,
he could be a control freak and say, give me that. And
I mean, he managed to play bass on stage all those years. I mean, he could play the guitar. I think he just chose not to.
Yeah.
Because also he could compose and arrange for the guitar. I just think it wasn't an instrument he really cared for personally.
You can't do a lot of those weird numbered, flattened, augmented chords on a guitar. He was like, I'll stick with a piano.
So for pre-60s, the advantage goes to the Disney documentary.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now going to the 60s, which is a very large section.
Oh, yeah.
That took me some time to organize my notes. Here again, going over this, just looking down what I've checked off, the Disney documentary definitely has the advantage here as well. However, there's a big however. That there are parts that it falls short on that really shouldn't. Like, for instance, I mean, I didn't see this really coming about in board comments about this documentary, and I didn't really think about it until I sat down and really started doing notes. But where the Disney documentary really starts to fall apart and not live up to its promise is Pet Sounds and Forward.
Yeah.
When it came to Pet Sounds, there was very minimal discussion about it. Like surprisingly minimal. Where the other 2 documentaries spend a lot more time on the origins, on the production.
Yep.
Even showing things like how American Band showed several of the Endless Harmony and American Band showed clips, if not the whole thing, of the promotional films, like the Sloop John B film, the I Just Wasn't Made for These Times film, and how American Band also used other footage that really belonged to promotional films for other songs, but used them as backing for various Pet Sounds songs.
Yep. And the bonus with that was because, if I understand correctly, Vestron Video, the people who were making this movie, Malcolm Leo and his people, had access to the 8-track tapes, but they only had a 4-track deck, so it didn't pick up all the tracks, which is why some of those Pet Sounds songs have like single-track vocals.
Yeah, they're not alternate tapes.
Yeah.
They're just
They just didn't pick up all the tracks.
Tapes. Yeah. They're incomplete versions as portrayed. The tapes themselves were fine.
Yeah.
And something else that, well, there's several things about documentaries that will eternally bother me. And one of them is that, I only have this checked off for the Disney doc. The implication that Pet Sounds was a failure.
Or sometimes the explication that it was it was not. It went top 10. Yeah.
It went to 10. It spawned 2 hit singles and 1 hit B-side.
Yeah.
Because God Only Knows got enough airplay to chart in the top 40. And it was critically well received. It was a massive hit in England and elsewhere.
And had the sales been audited properly, it would have gone gold by the summer of 67.
Well, that, and of course, we all think a lot of times that the Beach Boys get slighted, but as we found out some years ago, it wasn't just the Beach Boys when it came to reporting to the RIAA, because Ticket to Ride, one of the biggest Beatles singles ever, didn't get certified gold until the 90s?
Ever.
Oh, ever? It still hasn't?
Yeah, Bruce Spicer.
No, I know.
Every time we see Bruce Spicer, he says, by the way, do any of you here believe that Ticket to Ride did not sell 1 million copies? Well, guess what? It has never been certified gold.
To its credit, at the very end of the Disney doc, there's a little caption on the screen that Pet Sounds, certified gold in
2000 whatever.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, it was certified platinum. So somehow it sold 500,000 copies in like a month.
Yeah.
But no, it's that they actually cleaned things up and gave it its due. And Pet Sounds also, I think, I don't have firm numbers on or documentation on this, but I think it's only been out of print for, if it was ever out of print, it was for very short periods of time.
Yeah, like I would imagine probably when the Beach Boys moved over to Warner Brothers, it might have been out of print for a short time.
But then in 1972, it was put with So Tough. So that's a pressing of it.
Yeah,
and
I think it was also released individually by
And
Warner's.
then the first copy I got was one of those mid-'80s Capitol reissue records with the green label.
And it sounds pretty good, too. It was a good mastering job on that one.
And one of the first CDs I ever got in 1990 was Pet Sounds. And this was probably before, the Twofers already were. Or were the Twofers
Yeah, the Twofers were out. Yeah, the Twofers came out in 90.
But other things fell out of print for significant amounts of time.
You know what was out of print for us? You know what was out of print for a super duper long time that I never really realized? Beach Boys Party. Like after maybe a year or two, it just fell out of print, and it was literally forgotten about until the 80s.
Well, I betcha I know why. Because Capitol probably saw it as a novelty record.
Well, it could be.
Like Capitol probably didn't take it, even though it sold very, very well, Capitol probably didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, because when they did those budget reissues in the 80s, I don't know if it was Brad Elliott or somebody else involved, stepped up and said, we should maybe get the Beach Boys Party album back out. And they're like, oh, yeah, we kind of forgot about that one.
But yeah, Pet Sounds was not a failure.
No.
I wouldn't doubt that Brian felt a little crushed that it wasn't like a massive #1 hit. But dude, it still did well. It still got a lot of attention. And
it caused Sergeant Pepper's to happen.
Well, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so Pet Sounds is kind of given the short end of the stick on the Disney documentary,
which is surprising.
Where it's given more attention on the other two.
Yeah.
Like more full songs were played and all of that. And Good Vibrations gets a good amount of attention in all three. You know, and of course, American Band is a gold standard when it comes to Smile.
Yeah.
Well, just the mere fact that it gave everybody in the fan community fire.
Ooh.
Which was something that had never been put out there in any kind of legitimate form.
Nope.
I mean, it hadn't even been booted, had it?
I don't know. There might have been a few select people who had audio cassettes of it, but
yeah, it probably wasn't like widely available on boots,
like on a major bootleg label or anything.
And there was like American Band had the performance of Surf's Up from Inside Pop and had about the recording of Fire. Van Dyke Parks was interviewed in, well, he was actually interviewed for the 1976 special, but they put a lot of it in American Band.
Did they? He wasn't in the Disney one. They didn't talk to him for that one, did they?
No, they just had the archival clips.
Yeah.
But not much was said about Smile in the Disney documentary. And then here comes another thing I hate. And all three documentaries do this. The implication, or as you said, explication, that after Smile, Brian dropped off the edge of the earth.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like, something I noticed about an American Band, I don't remember if did they show the Time to Get Alone thing in the Disney doc or Endless Harmony? Do you remember?
I think they used some clips from that film, but not as much as what was in the American Band.
Because in American Band, I think that's around the time when they're talking about, oh, Brian, where was he? He was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, they show that, and then you can see Brian in the studio producing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, okay, Brian may have pulled back and didn't have the trajectory and the work ethic he had, mainly because nobody can keep that up.
No.
I mean, and I definitely will allow that Brian was going through some stuff.
Of course.
You know, mental health issues, drug taking, there was a whole bunch of things going on. But the man he wasn't Syd Barrett. He wasn't a hermit. He still went out and did stuff. Yeah. He still wrote things. He still produced things. Mm-hmm. He owned a vitamin health store.
Oh, co-owned it.
Yeah.
From what I understand, he didn't really do much.
Yeah, but he'd still go down there in his bathrobe. Sometimes he rang people up. I mean,
and I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but I don't remember if it was the show we saw in 2022 or the one that we saw pre-pandemic that Al did, in which he was talking about that time in the Beach Boys' career. The way he phrased it was a way I never heard anybody else put it. Al said that he and the rest of the guys thought that maybe they should pitch in and take some of the load off Brian's back.
Yeah.
So I never heard it put that way, because we all thought that maybe basically the way the story is usually told is that they all pitched in because Brian was dropping out, as opposed to, hey, let's give Brian a little break.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a combination of the two.
Or more like, I wrote a song. Can we do this? Like, I think the others just started stepping up more. Like, hey, we've been at this long enough. I can write a song too.
Yeah.
I'd like to produce. I mean, I think that's what happened with Dennis. That Dennis wanted to learn how to produce and do these things. And Brian kind of hanging back gave him license to do that. He didn't have to be like, oh, Brian's our only producer. Like, he didn't have to be, well, not that Dennis was afraid of anything, but he didn't have to be afraid of like stepping on Brian's toes. And something with the Disney documentary, and this bothers me, that Marilyn Wilson Rutherford was interviewed, and she talked about Brian took to his bed, and it's like, girl, what about American Spring? Brian spent quite a bit of time in the early 70s producing an entire record for you and your sister.
Yep.
Don't you remember that?
And went on the road promoting it.
And I mean, look at that picture.
There are radio interviews with Brian proving that he got out of the house and went in different parts of the country to talk about it.
And look at that picture from circa, I don't know if it's from 70 or 72, the one where Brian's wearing a Mickey Mouse t-shirt. Yep.
The one that every house had one of at the time.
I had a shirt like that.
Yep.
I mean, he looks damn good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not all fat and hairy and everything.
No.
He looks pretty damn good. I mean, again, I just don't like this perpetual
Marilyn, we
belief.
love you, but come on. Unless, I mean, for all we know, it could have been editing or something.
I know. I mean, that definitely could be the case. Hey, we saw with Get Back versus Let It Be.
Yeah.
That here we're dealing with two, Peter Jackson and Michael Lindsay Hogg, who were dealing with the same films, the same footage.
Mm-hmm.
And they both turn out projects that gave a completely different narratives of the Beatles.
Yep.
So, yeah, it could have been, I mean, I'm not saying it's all on Marilyn. It could have been the editing, but I just hate that like Brian canceled Smile, Brian backed out of Monterey, and then he went to bed.
Yeah.
By accounts of people who know what they're talking about, Brian really didn't take to his bed until after Murray died in June of 73.
Pretty much, yeah.
Not saying he never had periods. I mean,
sure.
I'm sure that he, again, with the various struggles and things he was going through, I'm sure he did take to his bed and was inactive, but it wasn't constant. I mean, geez, even like, okay, the cancellation of Smile and backing out of Monterey. So we're talking about spring, early summer of 67. Okay, what record came out more than a year later? What single for the Beach Boys?
Do It Again.
Yeah, produced by
Brian.
Thank you. So, yeah. And well, wait, did Brian, is it credited to Brian and Mike?
I think it's produced. The songwriting credit is produced. I think it's credited to Brian and Mike. Yeah.
And it's probably the same old setup that Mike, for the most part, does the lyrics and Brian does the music.
I have confirmed it is Brian and Mike. I forgot we have a device that can get just about any information you want.
And that also kind of ties into that the Beach Boys couldn't get arrested in the late 60s and early 70s. I mean, things were a lot tougher.
Yeah.
But, okay, they still had a hit single in 1968. So I think a lot of people forget about that. Something else that all three documentaries also forget about. There was another hit single that is virtually ignored in 1967.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what is that single?
Heroes and Villains.
Heroes and Villains.
Yeah.
The only mention...
And Darwin, too, really.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah.
But the only mention of Heroes and Villains in any of those documentaries, Endless Harmony does play a little bit of it, and American Band has the live performance from Good Vibrations in Central Park.
Correct.
Which was from 1971.
Yeah.
And it's referred to as an oldie.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Wait, is that I'm trying to remember because I know that was the very first song that was in the full aired version of the Good Vibrations in Central Park. But what I'm wondering, what I don't remember, was that line when I think it was Carl said, "Want to hear an oldie?"
Yeah.
Was that actually before Heroes and Villains, or is that how it was edited?
Honey, I don't know.
That's something we gotta.
I truly do not know.
I don't remember, but
it bugs me because Heroes and Villains is one of my favorite all-time songs of ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it still went to number 12. I mean, it wasn't a complete failure, but it felt like a failure because it wasn't a smash hit. It wasn't another Good Vibrations.
Yeah.
And also the whole thing of Brian going out to the radio station, to hand a promo single to the DJ and they, put this on. And the newbie DJ refused to do it because it wasn't on the playlist. And he calls the program director who was like, wait, Brian Wilson is there and he has a record for you and wants you to have the exclusive premiere of it. But yeah, I
got suspended once for doing that. But
yeah, but was Brian Wilson
it wasn't
there?
Brian Wilson, no.
But it's like, dude, why are you ignoring heroes and villains? But yeah, Darlin as well. Darlin what was Darlin's peak position? It wasn't great, but it wasn't like...
It got a lot of airplay.
Yeah, I mean, was it 19?
It was 19,
okay.
Yeah. And a Cashbox had it at number 10.
I mean, I feel like the Disney documentary was firing on all cylinders up until a certain point.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. It was interesting to watch. It was fun to watch. A lot of good visuals, some good interviews, kind of a nice mix of archival and more current things. But then it just starts to fall apart. It just starts to fall off. The big complaint is that the documentary should have been in multiple parts, like so many things are nowadays. I mean, when you're on a streaming platform, you can do anything you want. You're not tied to a network's time slot. You can have it be as long or as short as you want. You can have as many episodes as you want. The episodes can be whatever length. And they were doing great. And you kind of expect it to say, come to an end. And it's like, do you want to watch episode 2? Yes.
Yeah. And I'm going to demonstrate Beatles envy here, which is okay because I love the Beatles.
Yeah.
But Anthology, that came out in the mid-90s, 3 2-hour episodes on TV. What was it, 7 when they put it out on home video release?
Well, yeah, because the DVDs, you figure, it was VHS first. So the VHS release, it was like, I guess, an hour or so per tape. So, I mean, if you go by the broadcast, that would have been 6 hours. But I think there were 10 tapes. So there were like 10 episodes, I think. I mean, there was a lot more on the home video release than on the broadcast.
Oh, yeah. So, and that was for a band that started in 1957, let's just say, and ended in 1969, really.
Yeah.
And then reunited for a recording session or two.
Yeah.
And it took that much. And then flash forward to 2021. It took over 8 hours to tell the story of just 1 month of that group's existence. What in the world makes people think that they can make a decent Beach Boys documentary? Even the limited scope of the Disney documentary, they cut it off at 1980, which is less than even an American band was talking about. Mm-hmm. And they still couldn't get it right. Because what happened in the Disney documentary, they're like, okay, Pet Sounds, yeah, whatever, Smile, and then, vroom. Oh yeah, by the way, here's some 70s stuff too. And hey, they're reuniting at Paradise Cove and having a chat we're not going to let you hear any of.
Well, and also, to jump ahead a little bit, the Disney documentary, this actually made me laugh out loud. Well, then again, I don't think none of the documentaries ever actually mention 15 Big Ones at all. Not
really. You see Linda McCartney hold a copy of one in American Band, but that's about it.
It's not like they say 15 Big Ones was released in 1976 and rock and roll music went to number 5. And the
album went to number 8, which it was more successful than Pet Sounds.
Yeah. Like they never mention the record at all.
Yeah. And it was the big comeback album for Brian.
And I mean, love it or hate it, the fact is, it was a big hit for a band that hadn't seen a big hit of new music in a long time.
Yeah.
But man, all of these documentaries also fail.
Yeah.
Talking about the period of 68 to 73.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say what I said to you one night when we were discussing this while walking the dog. My kingdom for a documentary that just focuses on that period.
Seriously.
There is so much story to tell because you can have, let me just list stuff off the top of my head, not necessarily in chronological order. You have the Maharishi tour.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Do It Again. You've got touring overseas, which is covered somewhat in these documentaries, going to Europe and finding great success and great reception over there. You've got the whole Charles Manson thing, again, which is touched upon in the documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have much of Dennis's rise as a composer and producer. There's not much about them move. In fact, I think the move to Warner's isn't mentioned at all.
Yeah, right.
You've got Jack Riley coming. Jack Riley is never mentioned anywhere.
Yeah, love him or hate him, he made things happen.
You don't have the Carnegie Hall concert that was backed by several fans. Like the fans paid to have this show put on, and it did very well. And then the pairing with the Grateful Dead, which started to give the Beach Boys a little bit more street cred.
Yep.
Because the Grateful Dead, that was a huge endorsement for a new audience, which probably also helped Surf's Up go to number 29. That's hardly mentioned. The existence of Surf's Up and Sunflower is hardly mentioned. And then you've got the whole Blondie and Ricky and the Flame. That's a story in itself, bringing in these two young guys from South Africa and with their musicianship, their songwriting, and just their influence on Carl that really helped make Carl a better producer. Because the stuff he produced for them is amazing.
It really is.
And then you've got them building up their touring act, which really started as early as 1968 when they started bringing in people like Ed Carter and bringing in the horn section, and having a really strong back line to where it got to the point where I love how in Mike's book, when he speaks with great pride and a little bit of snarkiness about how when they toured with Chicago and how they blew the doors off the joint.
Well, after being taunted by the guys in Chicago, Mike's like, okay, that's how you're going to be.
They blew the doors off the joint and leaving the audience screaming for more. And then they're like, have fun, guys. It's like, I don't know how much is left out there for you, but they built themselves up to where Rolling Stone declared them the band of the year.
Despite having no new releases
in
out.
1973.
Was it 73? I thought it was like 75.
Okay, whenever it was, they didn't have much sitting in the racks in the stores. Yeah. They weren't really on Billboard. It was on the strength of their touring act and their ticket sales.
Yep.
There's that whole story. I mean, you can talk about Brian kind of falling off, but the fact is, you can talk about the negative or you can talk about the positive. Like, Brian wasn't as prolific as he had been. Brian was going through problems, but the other guys were still keeping the fires burning.
Yeah.
And doing a pretty damn good job of it. You could talk about Bruce leaving. There's so much story there that we know about, but it's never shared.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's stuff that we know about, but there's also stuff that we know about in which there are details we don't know about that are probably extremely fascinating. And that's one reason I love Endless Summer Quarterlies. They have really, we're not being paid to say this, by the way. I'm just mentioning this off the top of my head because I'm thinking, okay, somebody could say, well, you can read about that in Endless Harmony Quarterly. Yeah, but if you want Endless Summer Quarterly, yeah. But that's the thing. That stuff is out there for people to make a documentary with.
Yeah.
It is there. And while these people are still with us and able to talk about this, and you cannot get us a documentary that includes this stuff, make it longer if you have to. Make it multi-parts. Make it a weekly series that lasts a few months if you have to.
And it just would be nice to not keep perpetuating the idea of the Beach Boys being a particular thing that existed at a particular time. Because that really that just really cuts them short. And the people who really know, like people of all different ages, spanning generations, spanning decades, who have bothered to dig into this stuff. What were we talking about the other day? Kind of like the levels of like immersion or addiction or your gateway drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
How you kind of start with the hits. And then
Oh, yeah.
And then somebody gives you a copy of Pet Sounds. And you're like, okay. And then, well, nowadays it's probably a copy of the Smile Sessions. Years ago, it was getting a Smile bootleg. That took you to the next level.
And the cool thing is there are different versions of the Smile Sessions to pick from. You know?
But then it's almost like like you've achieved a particular level when you listen to Sunflower. Like Sunflower is kind of, yeah, you're in this deep. Like they're not going to get you back. Like you're here for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sunflower, it's not like it's groundbreaking. It doesn't have the same cachet as Pet Sounds, but yet Sunflower is just so damn good.
Oh yeah.
And it's the only true group effort.
Yeah.
Where everybody had their hands in writing, producing, whatever you want to do.
And they're working together at it too.
Well, yeah, it wasn't like the White Album where it's like, here's a Carl song and here's a Mike song. Like it's a Beach Boys album.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of to go back to Endless Summer Quarterly, that issue where they took a very deep dive into Sunflower and just, I don't remember offhand, but I just remember really loving reading about, especially when you look at the album cover, how it's them with several of their children, like Brian and Mike and Al and Carl's kids. It was just kind of this like Southern California, almost like the next step from being kids hanging out on a beach and driving hot rods and going to the hamburger stand.
Yeah.
It's like, because here are these guys who are all now fathers, but they're kind of relaxed. They're not wearing jackets and ties and all straight-laced and everything. Like they're lounging on this emerald green grass on a sun-washed day.
At a golf course.
Well,
I mean, you don't know by looking at it.
I'm talking about
course.
just looking at the cover.
Yeah.
You know, it just shows success and it's just beautiful. And the music goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sunflower is
the music sounds like that cover.
And the music is not troubled. It's such a pleasant album to listen to.
Oh, yeah.
And it just never, ever gets its due.
Nope.
I mean, it's barely mentioned. Endless Harmony is the only one that even acknowledges its existence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't talk about it at all. And that's another thing. These documentaries, you know, or the documentary I'd love to see can dive deeper into the albums of, because they put out an album, at least one album a year between 68 and 73.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot you can say about those albums.
Yep, absolutely. And then again, from 76 to 1980, even though a lot of those you don't really want to talk much about, but still.
No. Bad.
And the thing is, like, it's not just the documentaries that do that for a long time. Now, this is a thought that crept in my mind while we were talking just now, actually, that the compilations also did that. But at the same time, for a long time, the compilations that came out had no choice because different labels had different rights to different songs. Like for a long time, you could not get, like you could not get a Capitol record that had Good Vibrations on it for quite a while.
Well, yeah, because Good Vibrations ideally should have been on Endless Summer. I mean, find me a more summery song, first of all, and it was a #1 hit.
That was part of the problem. And another thing I thought of was the Beach Boys exhibit they had at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Beach Boys exhibit they had at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It came to a dead end when the 60s ended.
Mm-hmm.
If not soon. Well, actually, no, I think Pet Sounds was when it cut off. Because there wasn't anything after Pet Sounds.
And again, was that the story that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame chose to tell?
It probably
Or
was. Because I think the name of the exhibit was like the Beach Boys in the 60s or something.
Because, I mean, the material that was in the exhibit came from Justin and Jonah Wilson, who I believe were the custodians of Audrey Wilson's collection. Like, I think after she died, they took over all the things she had kept and made sure that it was well cared for. And
which it was.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think they made sure it was stored properly and kept so that it could be, things could be used in future projects and things like that. So, I mean, I'm sure Audrey kept stuff long after the 60s, but again, it's what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame chose to exhibit.
Yeah. But I remember being there and thinking, okay, so probably in that next room we'll have some stuff from the 70s. No, that was the exhibit.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was called the Beach Boys in the 60s or whatever it was called. But it's like the world does not want people to know anything past Good Vibrations unless it's Kokomo, which they managed to sneak in the Disney documentary despite the 1980 cutoff.
Yeah, it was like over the closing credits.
Yeah.
Which, again, that was a number one hit. They can't leave that out, but it was kind of awkward.
Yeah.
Even still, it's like going up to 1980, okay, so here's what I checked off for the Disney documentary. And this is roughly chronological order. So you have mention of the Surf's Up album, but nothing about what was on it or anything. The Beach Boys kind of struggling to figure out who they are and how they're going to move forward. Brian falling off. Blondie and Ricky come in. And then Endless Summer. So nothing about Bruce leaving. Nothing about Holland. Yeah, and that's another whole story.
Yep.
Going to Holland.
You can make a documentary out of that.
Yeah. So it goes right to Endless Summer and the success spawned from that. But again, it doesn't really go into great detail. It just shows they're playing concerts to huge arenas, mainly Anaheim in 1976. And then there's a clip of Brian's 34th birthday, which we see much more of in American Band.
Yeah.
And then Dennis branching out onto his own. But American Band has like him in the recording studio. It has a clip of River's song.
Yeah.
But nobody really talks about his actual album. And I don't think that's mentioned in the Disney doc at all. And then the Disney doc shows July 4th, 1980, their concert in Washington, D.C. And then that's the end of that. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about any of the albums. They don't talk about Love You.
They don't talk about switching over to Caribou Records.
They just skip right to 1980. And in the other documentaries, like Endless Harmony and American Band, at least go into, well, this took place after 1980, but they go into, an interesting little piece of the Beach Boys story is when they were the whole undesirable element. When James Watt, who was on Reagan's staff,
Secretary of the Interior.
Yeah. How he didn't want there to be concerts on the mall in Washington
Rock
anymore.
Concerts.
And
because the Beach Boys were replaced by Wayne Newton.
And there were other concerts. The Beach Boys weren't the only band to play the mall in Washington.
Yeah.
But he kind of specifically singled out the Beach Boys, not really thinking about how the current president was from California.
Well, the thing is, was he actually targeting the Beach Boys? Because I'm pretty sure it was just, we're not going to have rock bands here because they attract the wrong element. It just so happened that the upcoming rock band was the Beach Boys.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it was so much him or if the media, it didn't play well.
Yeah.
And Reagan kind of did some damage control, and because he had no problem with it, and he invited the Beach Boys to the White House and made this public apology and made James Watt, he smacked him on the butt with a paddle or something.
Hey, Jimmy, could you name the California governor in 1967, please?
Yeah. So But yeah, I mean, and I get cutting it off at 1980 because then you can avoid talking about Landy and Dennis's death and
Well, Landy was around in 76 too, remember?
yeah, but Landy,
He was a much bigger impact
yeah.
in many ways,
I mean,
good and bad.
well, you look back at that time. In 1975, 76, Landy took somebody who was, we've heard some, I really don't want to drag anything out,
Yeah.
but I mean, Brian was pretty bad off.
Mm-hmm.
And Landy got him out of the house, away from stuffing himself with drugs and food, got him doing some exercise, got him back in the recording studio, got him to take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's why Landy was pretty quickly fired because they're like, okay, he's fine now. Bye. And of course, Brian wasn't fine.
Well, they did bring him a different therapist, though, that Brian did get along quite well with. And unfortunately, he died in a freak accident.
Ugh. But the second round of Landy worked probably arguably even better because Brian really slimmed down and got really clean. But
then it got much worse.
But then it went way too far.
Yeah.
Then Landy took it way too far. And Landy started taking advantage of Brian in every possible way.
And the thing is, like, I do not blame anybody for deciding, okay, the cutoff is going to be 1980 because you avoid a lot of really bad stuff by doing that.
But at the same time, you avoid some pretty good stuff, like Kokomo going to #1 and being a huge hit, which, again, love it or hate it. Dude, I remember being so damn happy that my favorite band had a #1 hit. Like, that was a good thing. That song's got hook. Then going into the 90s when they had the Good Vibrations box set and Brian getting away from Landy and getting married again. I mean, there were still some good things to tell.
There were some good things to tell, but there really wasn't a lot to tell about the Beach Boys as a group.
Well, yeah.
That's the thing, which is another reason why I really don't blame the 1980 cutoff. And when it was announced that it was cutting off at 1980, I immediately pictured that July 4th concert.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I watched that recently. We did an episode about it, I think.
Yeah.
And something that surprised me was how enjoyable it was and how everybody pretty much looked like they were all together.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would look at them and you would not say, "Oh God, somebody's had a rough day," or "Ooh, look at Brian." It's more like, okay, these guys look like they have their shit together.
But I mean, Endless Harmony does take the story up to 1998,
which is what they were intending to do anyway.
Yeah. And it does tell about Landy, Brian getting away from Landy, and Carl's passing, but kind of what happened after that. And I mean, that's the thing. If you're going to tell a Beach Boys story, you have to accept it ain't all going to be happy, but it isn't all tragic either.
Yeah.
And I feel like kind of the trajectory of most documentaries is it's happy until like 1966, 67.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets a lot more tragic without acknowledging the happy and without acknowledging that. And the Disney doc did do a bit of this where it's like, okay, sun and fun, hit singles, touring, yay. But Murray or Brian feeling the pressure, Brian starting to take drugs. I mean, it does kind of show the shadows as much as the light. I mean, you can't tell a Beach Boys story without both sides.
Yeah.
But you can't be all one way or all the other way. But there's still just a lot that is not told. And I think all three films, despite it being about the Beach Boys, are still way too Brian-centric.
They are. And
where like the contributions of the other guys don't get their due. Like, you don't have enough about Carl really stepping up and taking leadership of the band. You don't have as much about kind of Mike, well, like what Mike talked about in his book, how he took it upon himself to, I mean, and he didn't do this single-handedly, but just kind of learning about how to book shows, how to tour, so that you get asked back to the same venues and festivals and things year after year, and you really build a following. I mean, that kind of thing has kept them going for over 50 years.
Yeah.
Because Mike started doing that in the early 70s. And it's like, Al is hardly mentioned. Yeah. And then Dennis and Bruce. It's just like the other guys are just kind of glossed over. And it doesn't have to be that way.
It's kind of like the trouble that I've mentioned with doing this podcast, and that it seems that our conversations always gear toward Brian. It's just so hard not to, because he's the guy who basically made it all happen, really. Without his music, his direction, his arrangements, his production, you wouldn't have the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Eventually, they made their own contributions.
But would they have done so if Brian hadn't started to back away? Both deliberately, because it's like, guys, I gotta sit down and rest for a while, or because he just couldn't. And
again, did Brian back away because everybody else was starting to carry their own weight, or was it the other way around that we've always heard? That's because that Brian backed out, or started backing down, that everybody else started.
Well, it's kind of chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah, it really is. And going off on a completely different topic here, something I was thinking about Endless Harmony and the Disney doc, both of which were made pretty much under the Beach Boys' direction and control and everything, is that they had to bring in third parties to talk about how wonderful they are. I don't know, something, I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, I kind of think I understand where they're going when they do that kind of thing. They're like, hey, we want some other credibility brought in here so people know who we are. So people think, oh, I see such and such a performer. I see Terrence Trent D'Arby in a new name saying, oh, I love these guys so much. Well, maybe his fans will start following us too and all that. But the thing is, I kind of like it when it just keep it in the family.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I do too. And it's kind of, do I really care what Terrence Trent D'Arby had a couple hit singles in the 80s, and he thought he was like I remember at that time that he made some great pronouncements about how he was just as good as the Beatles, which anybody who says that, it's kind of a sign that you're not anywhere near the Beatles. But it's like, I don't really care what he has to say. I do care about that music professor in I Just Wasn't Made for These Times analyzing Brian's chord progression in The Warmth of the Sun. That I care about. That was great. Like, that's where you want to bring in an outside person who can speak authoritatively on a particular point.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah.
That's a good thing.
And that's something that I liked about an American band, though, is that it's only the Beach Boys telling the story.
Yeah. Of course, in some places, it's very...
it's heavily scripted, but still, at least they're the ones doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if there was something that was just totally off base, they would have said, I'm not reading this crap.
Well, it's like the decision made with Anthology. They could have had 50,000 different people talking authoritatively about the Beatles, or even people who were very, very close.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Yeah, you know what they did instead? You know how ABC aired Anthology here? Instead, they made a separate documentary that was nothing but that happening. Remember that one? I know Tim Allen was in it. Bono, I think. Yeah.
It was that Revolution?
Yes, that's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, and that was around 2000, I think.
Yeah, I think that what ended up being, say, Endless Harmony and the Disney doc, if they would have taken those outside the family and just made a separate thing with just them, it would have been something special.
Yeah.
It would have been definitely more palatable, I think.
Well, yeah, but...
Because here you are, you're watching the Beach Boys talk about themselves in their own documentary, and then suddenly you have these musicians that you may or may not have heard about. It's like, wait, who let you in the door?
Yeah. Like, who are you? And
Yeah.
why do I care about what you have to say?
Yeah.
I mean, they could be saying stuff that's really nice and valid, but it's like, are you here just because you are some kind of name or because you really have something significant to contribute?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that doesn't really do much for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I want to hear from people who were actually there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's why I was glad to see Marilyn, and kind of why, like in Beautiful Dreamer, which, is just beautifully done, brilliantly done. I mean, of course, that's all about Brian.
Yeah.
But you have David Anderle. You have
the Vossi Posse.
You've got the Vossi Posse. Like, you've got people who were in the airport photo.
Yeah.
It's like, get me as many of these people as you can. You've got the guy who gave Brian his first tab of acid.
Yep.
Now I was kind of surprised to see that. Okay, you have the outsider. You have Sir George Martin. George Martin, who was not involved in any way of anything Brian was doing.
Nope.
Yet he gave an important perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's George Martin. Like, he doesn't have to do much. But the fact is, it was still good to hear from him, especially addressing the whole, like, Brian listens to Rubber Soul, so he makes pet sounds. And the Beatles hear pet sounds and they make Sgt. Pepper. Kind of how it's not like it was some kind of war.
And he's like, we were looking forward to what Brian was going to have for us now, and we don't get it.
Yeah, and it's not like there was a war going on. It's not like they hated each other. They were more looking at what each other was doing and being encouraged and influenced by that. And it was almost giving both sides motivation to go further, to go there, and do things that most other bands didn't have the guts to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had all those little bands out there, and then Brian Wilson and the Beatles that were going above and beyond what anybody else was doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it was great to have Sir George Martin in that documentary. If you're going to have an outsider, that's a hell of an outsider.
Yeah.
But that's the difference. It wasn't just a bunch of talking heads. It was people who actually really had something to say that contributed to that narrative.
Right. So in summation, what do we have to say about these three documentaries?
Well, again, the whole thing is like, which of these three is the best? And the answer is none of them.
They all fail at a lot of things.
They all have their good points.
Absolutely.
They all have their good points. Like, the Disney doc wins on the 60s, like origin up to the mid 60s. American Band gives us a lot of music, a lot of performances, a lot of things that we wouldn't have had otherwise at that time, had never been seen. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And Endless Harmony kind of did what American Band didn't do. Like, it kind of filled in some gaps and did so in a much brighter, more colorful way. Because Endless Harmony is visually very well done. Where, like, American Band, they didn't have a lot of budget, and it kind of, like, American Band is very VHS.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where Endless Harmony is a DVD.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was something that I thought of, too, when we were watching the Disney documentary. We watched it twice so far, and they showed that 1969 TV appearance when they were doing California Girls.
God.
And it took me back to Endless Harmony when that first aired. And I remember everybody online was like, oh, God, as soon as I heard them doing California Girls, I knew exactly what clip it was going to be. And sure enough, it was that same old tired. That was the first time I'd ever seen it, because that wasn't in an American Band. So to me, that was something new.
Well, that may have been
the Kraft Television Hour or something?
That may have been making the rounds. And also remember, there are some films that say British fans have seen that we haven't.
That's true.
So
yes.
Maybe it was more the kind of thing that other people in the fan community were tired of, but we weren't.
And yeah, all three of these documentaries, they have their failures, they have their successes. But I do have to say this. if I'm in the mood to sit down and watch a Beach Boys documentary, I am easily going to take a dive for an American Band.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I think the real star of that one is the actual music. There is so much in that.
There
really
is.
And when you think about the time that it came out, 1984, 85, that was a treasure trove, because how much of that stuff had been seen since it first aired.
Well, it's like...
And you have a lot of stuff that never got seen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of home movies that Dennis shot. And there were some home things that someone else, like you, I saw this in the list too. We were wondering, wait, was David Marks even mentioned at all in An American Man? He wasn't mentioned, but there is a very brief home movie of the Beach Boys performing somewhere, and David Marks is on the stage.
Yeah. And I think it might also just have to do with us and the age that we are.
Could be, yeah.
Because, I mean, for me, American Band came across my radar because it was on HBO or Showtime frequently. And, you know, I was an 80s latchkey kid, so I would come home from school and watch TV a lot. So I got to see it a lot, even before we had a VCR and I could record it. I mean, it was on pretty frequently. And, I mean, at that time, I had only read one Beach Boys book. I didn't know there was such a thing as interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that I could ask my librarian to seek out other Beach Boys books. I didn't know that was a thing that I could do. So I was limited to the one book that my library did have. Fortunately, it was the Byron Preiss book, which was very knowledgeable about the music up to the late 70s. So at least I had a good book to read, and American Band filled in a lot of information that I didn't have and exposed me to songs I didn't know. So, I mean, as a kid who had missed a lot of this stuff first time around, it was a very good resource for me.
Yeah.
And I do have gratitude for it for existing.
Yeah. And even when I got to be a fan around 1989, 1990, An American Band was all we had. That was it. And we both watched the hell out of it, both together and separately.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't know of anything. I mean, the only other book I knew of was Heroes and Villains by Stephen Gaines, which talk about nothing but tragedy.
Oh, man. Yeah.
You know, it's like the book begins with Dennis waking up in a dumpster in Venice Beach. But yeah, I mean, I was like, ooh, maybe this book will tell me more about the music. No, it didn't talk about the music at all.
No.
That was a hairy book for me to read when I was like, 14? But yeah, I mean, that's all we had until the 90s.
Yep.
When fortunately we started getting
more stuff.
Things like, well, again, that's why Endless Harmony, I really liked that when it came out because it was fresh and it was new and it had some different things. Still didn't tell the whole story, but at least it was another documentary.
Yeah. And speaking of telling the whole story and all that, I want to put this out here on both of our behalves. Anybody hearing this who wants to make a Beach Boys documentary or biopic, please talk to us. Yeah. We will give you guidance. We will hook you up with people you want to talk to, like say Ian Rustin, Andrew Doe, David Leaf, John Stebbins perhaps too. And we can get you in touch with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then again, if you're listening to this, you probably can get in touch with these people too.
These people.
You may be these people.
You are the people.
Yeah. We'll hook you up with David Beard. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of which, this is one thing I have a bone to pick with David Beard, and a friendly bone. I'll tell you why. Because what's one of the big complaints that I and many other fans have about the Disney doc is here's this big Beach Boys reunion, but here they are they're making a huge deal about the Beach Boys getting back together at Paradise Cove. And by the way, one thing that I absolutely love and is one of my favorite things in any Beach Boys anything, the look on Brian's face when the rest of the guys approach.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that smile. Oh, he was genuinely happy to see them. Oh my God. But what happens? They show this big reunion that they were hyping, And you can't hear it. You don't have any audio from it whatsoever. You don't have any of the singing, any of the talking. No, nothing.
Not even like pulling out for like little talking head interviews. Nothing. Was it Andrew Doe who said it's like, or no, I don't think it was Andrew Doe. It was somebody who said that one of those commercials for a drug when they're talking about where they have like a voiceover with all the side effects.
Yep.
Like you have people who are doing something like they're playing pickleball. They're dancing around the kitchen with the child. They're skateboarding or surfing or something. But then they have this voiceover about all of the terrible side effects this drug can have. You know, like possible side effects may include instant death.
By the way, just so you know, this is a primarily American thing. So those of you listening not in America, we have some weird ass commercials over here.
So it's like, okay, here's this happy person that this drug has improved their quality of life, but yet it can cause your face to melt off. But that's what it was like. So showing these guys like having this lovely little gathering by the ocean in a beautiful place. But we know nothing about what happened.
I voiced my complaints about that. And I remember it was David Beard, who, again, I like David. He's good people, but he responded to my thing and said, well, they were right by the ocean. They probably couldn't pick up the sound very well. My counter is this. We recorded an entire episode of this podcast feet away from the exact same ocean, about 100 miles south, with a little dinky digital recorder that I bought in 2007. And you could still hear every word we said.
Yep. Yeah, so don't tell me a professional recording crew wouldn't have been able to properly mic them.
And especially with AI technology, the way it is, that can isolate things. Some of which is being used in this actual podcast, by the way. So, yeah.
Yeah. So,
it's like, dude, don't give us this thing. Say, oh, they're together again and, and all this, but we're not going to let you hear any of it.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah,
really?
That was not cool, bro.
No. But man, I'll tell you one thing I would love to see in addition to like hearing what they were saying there. Some of those like 1976 films that are taken at Carl's house for Brian's 34th birthday. I want to see more of that stuff in its context. Right? Like what Carl and Al were singing with their guitars and Carl says, take it, Al, and all this. And I want to see more of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, come on, don't just tease us. Give us more, man. So, yeah. Anyway, anything else we should talk about, or should we just call it a day?
I think we should call it a day or a night.
It's a day.
Or something.
Night's part of the day.
Yeah.
And night divides the day too, as we all know.
Yeah, but that's a different band.
It is, but a band of at least one of the members likes the Beach Boys. So, yeah. Anywho, saying all that stuff. Like I said before, if you want to reach out to us, please keep listening because we have a recording, I believe, that we play at the end of the episode that says what our contact info is. And I can't remember any of it. So, yeah, because I never have to say it because we just drop it in. Anyway, I am Sean once again.
And I'm quite Lisa.
Very much so. And happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Carl.
Yep.
Many of you are going to hear this well after both of their birthday, so I don't care. It's still a happy day. So
or night.
It's still part of the day. So day has 24 hours. So anyway, we'll talk to you again sometime. When? I don't know. About what? We don't know yet. So we'll figure something out. We have
ideas.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the TuneX podcast. Please leave us a review at Apple Podcasts or iTunes.
You can hear us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and just about every other provider out there. If TuneX isn't on your favorite provider, please let us know.
You can email us at tunexpodcast@gmail.com. Our website, which includes the show notes, is tunex.fab4it.com. Fab4it is spelled F-A-B and then the number 4 and then I-T.
Feel free to connect with us on social media. TuneX is on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram and Twitter, both under the handle of TuneX Podcast.
Our opening and closing theme, Melody 10, was written and performed by Scattered Frog. All other music and sounds used in this episode remain the properties of their respective copyright holders and are used for the purposes of commentary and review. No infringement is intended.
We'll talk to you next time, friends. Until then, don't back down from that wave.